is about creating services for core. And I'm going to go over, this is an example import pod. So when you bring up a core pod, it does a couple of things. First off, you have a service graph, and in this example of a service graph, you have different models, which are the boxes, and then you have, they're wired together with networks or other connections. So you're creating VMs that are running a VNF image. You network them together, and you have to configure those VMs once they're instantiated. So you have configuration from XOS and the orchestrator into those VMs, and then start the VNF software. And that's all done through XOS's service infrastructure. So what we're going to go over in this tutorial is how you onboard a VNF into core. So you have a VM that has some sort of virtual network functionality, and you want to bring that into core. So you start with a VNF VM image. So right now we're using OpenStack, so those are images that are in glance format. You want to build an XOS service around that. Get the door, it's a little loud out there. And so you have to create a model, and a model is an abstraction of the service, and it provides basically all the different configuration knobs that you turn on that service. And then you have a synchronizer, and what a synchronizer does is it takes those settings you've set in XOS and then applies them to a running VNF that might be a VM and container. Then to make that, integrate that into core, you have to onboard the service, and that means taking all of your service model and your synchronizer and bringing it into a running pod, in this case a Corda box. Then we run a Tosca recipe that spins up, that basically instantiates an instance of your VM, or of your VNF in that VM, creates it on OpenStack, and does some configuration to it. And then we're going to reconfigure the VNF. We're going to show how to reconfigure the VNF using the XOS GUI. How that works is you make a change to a configuration in the XOS GUI. XOS's data model tells the synchronizer to go out and apply this configuration change to the VNF, and then the synchronizer goes out and does it. And then we're going to also show how, let's say you wanted to make a change to how the synchronizer works, how we can make a change to the synchronizer playlist and then redeploy that. So how to iteratively develop that. Oops. Wrong thing. Okay, so we're going to start off with a tour of the XOS GUI. So I'm going to hand out these notes. So how many people do we have? 1, 2. You don't need one.
7.
7? Great. So on here you'll see a IP address. And you'll need to connect to the network. So there's a network that's provided in here just for this. That's named ONF_hands-on, and the password is Cord Rocks. So you'll need to connect to that Wi-Fi network and use the password to log in. And then once you've logged in, you run SSH. So you're going to SSH to your Cord in a box instance that's hosted over there. You have to use the username Cord and the password's Cord. And then once you've done that, you have to find the password we're using for your XOS installation, which is these next couple of commands. So, what's up?
Yeah, if you connect to that network, you get access to the internet.
Yes, you'll have internet access there. Okay. Is everyone able to get on the network? Okay. So once you, and then everyone's able to get in and SSH into their to their box system. Okay. So XOS randomly generates passwords for the XOS web interface, and they're created in this directory and on this implementation. It's in tilde cord, then build, then platform installing credentials. So go in that, so cd into that directory, and then if you cat the file xos.admin.org, that contains the password. And so the username on the GUI is xos.admin.org. The contents of that file is the password. And then once you've discovered that, you need to log into the XOS GUI, and that's HTTP / the IP address on your little tag, :8080/XOS. Username is xos.admin.org. Password is what you catted out there. So once you've got in there, let me know.
Yeah.
Good? Okay.
Okay, is anyone logged in? Everyone?
Yep. Okay. All right, and once you've done that, you should see something that looks something like this.
Okay.
Okay.
Access.
Okay, so I'm going to give an overview of the XOS interface. So first off, there's the service dependency graph. When you first start this up, none of these services have a dependency between each other. Okay. But if you go over to the service graph, and when it finishes loading, you can see that there are already some relationships between things. So for example, we have an ONOS app that connects the Fabric and the ONOS Fabric objects. And we have various relations between these. And the graphs are generated through, are generated and created in this graph thing. And you generally have to drag them apart to get them sometimes to be readable, but not. Mateo's the GUI guy, so you guys ask him a question. All of the different models that we have that are built in are listed under here. You can also search for them. So, like if I wanted to look for like our site object, I could go through and find the site object and see that we have one that's created that's named my site. One thing you should check for is nodes. Nodes is your compute node. And so I have one. It is randomly named because our use of mass creates compute nodes of random names. So you should have a compute node here, and it should have a random name. If you click on the ID, you can see various parameters for it. There are some UI niceties in here. If you press the / key, you'll see a shortcut panel will pop out, and there are various commands. One of the things here, see how it says A, toggle debug view and model details tab? I'm going to hit A here, and you'll see a debug tab shows up. Hide the thing. This tells you things about when this object was instantiated, when it was last updated, and various other back-end details about it, which can be helpful when you're developing the service. There's also, if you do /, there are other things that will show, you can have it show a little more or less information for debugging purposes. So down here you see we have various services that are run on. This one has the address manager service, the fabric service, ONOS, and VTM. You also notice that there are no instances set up yet. When we onboard our service, you'll have an instance of the template manager.
And the password is the one. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Has everyone looked over their interface?
Okay. This is the wrong letters. We're trying to connect to Zach, no?
Okay.
So I didn't know how to use correct keywords. So column 18. International success. Okay. Access. Yeah, that one. There we go.
Okay.
That you can close this one.
Okay. So now that we've seen the what's in the GUI, I want to talk about what's in the inside of XOS. So XOS is made up of a lot of different containers. We have
one is working and the they doesn't work.
So we have a bunch of XOS containers. So and we have about 20 Docker containers. That's XOS core, some database and other supporting containers. All the service containers. Each service will have a synchronizer container. We have some LXC containers, which are hold OpenStack. We use a program called Juju to create our OpenStack instance, and it doesn't understand Docker containers, but it can install an LXC containers. And then there's some Docker containers for mass. So there's 6 Docker containers for mass. There are a few other supporting containers, like registry, virtual console. Those are used for for writing somewhere like a Maven repo contains the ONOS apps. They're been loaded into ONOS. And then there's 2 ONOS containers. One's for Fabric, so the external Fabric switches, and one is called ONOS Cord, and it runs VTN on top of OBS on the compute nodes that are run with OpenStack. There's also some networking. There's a management bridge, which goes to an external management network. All of these management and automation containers are all on the management bridge. There's also a fabric on and that is used to talk to mainly on, if you had a compute node, the compute node, the VNFs live on the fabric interface. So let's look at the core containers. If you're logged in back in your terminal session, I want you to SSH into head 1. Head 1 is the name of the Port-in-a-Box virtual head node. So do that. And then let's look at what containers, what are in these lists of containers. So the Exos container is probably the most, there are more Exos containers probably than anything else. So if you go into opt-cord profile, cord profile is the rendered profile directory. It contains all of the configuration files for XOS. Go in there and then run Docker Compose. We use Docker Compose to create these things. -P, base cord, we're using a profile called base cord. Think of a profile like E cord and M cord and R cord will have all of their profile. Base cord is a very minimal one that we're using just for the test. And PS, so list all the running containers. And you should see a list of a bunch of containers that are base cord underscore XOS, database XOS, core XOS, and various other XOS containers. I'll do that on my year-end show. So I have SSH in there. What's up?
No, that's fine.
So,
If anyone gets stuck at any moment, just ask. So my presence is meaningful.
If you want to see your mouse,
So you'll see that there are a bunch of containers. Most of them are up. Some of them have mapped ports. Most of them are running a Python or other process. There are some other containers that are out there.
So there aren't many shortcuts for now. They don't have more sort of application that can install a so now we are just like.
There's also ones for the ONOS containers. If you go into the ONOS core and ONOS fabric containers, you'll see in the Docker Compose PS, you'll see those ONOS containers.
The navigation. Maybe
You'll see that the ONOS core container is running. There's also, we use a thing called MAS, which is Metal as a Service. It's a canonical product, but we have augmented it with some additional Docker containers for that. That's also available. It's also the Etsy MAS. There's also Docker Registry, which is managed by Etsy MAS. And then there's also a list of LXC containers, which are used for and these are the containers that OpenStack uses. So these are the standard OpenStack processes. So Keystone, MongoDB, Sealonger, Nova, those sorts of things.
So, all those Docker containers, are they all on different Docker networks?
So some of them are on a shared network. We created an XOS Docker network. And what is this Docker? List. Yeah. So some of them create vaults. The XOS is an explicitly created network that we use. I think Mass and Maven both use those, but the problem is we have to be able to add and remove synchronizer containers, and so we use them all in that XOS. Okay. So is everyone taking a look at that, seeing where things are? Cord has a folder structure. So we use a program called Repo to manage all of our Git repos. We have a large number of them. The base is we call it Cord, And that's what we usually name to check things out. It doesn't necessarily have to be named cord, but that's sort of the general the general thing that we've been doing most of the time. Inside that there's one called build. Now here's the unfortunate thing. If you go and you look at our GitHub organization, what we check out as build is actually named cord. So yes, this is very confusing. The root of the build system is, if you look at the repo name is cord, but we check it out as we want to fix that eventually. Inside that there's something called platform install, which contains all of the Ansible scripts that build the platform. Next to this, and up and on here, there's something called mass, which is those mass components. But those are all the build system side of things. The other side is orchestration. So there's XOS, and XOS is GUI, and the XOS services are all listed in there. So let me take a look at that. So I'm going to go back to, so I'm in my core directory. You'll see there's build, component, and incubator, and ONOS apps, and test. Those are testing frameworks. ONOS apps are what we used previously for building the ONOS apps that go into ONOS. Incubator is, I think, in testing, or like not ready for release products. And component, we use a thing called Chameleon, which translates from gRPC to REST calls. That's it. But if we go into build, you'll see that we have a make file and a bunch of other files in here. These are a bunch of files used by the build system. If anyone came to my build system talk on Monday, or on Tuesday, I really went deep about how these all work. So there's a make file that controls the entire build system. If you go to platform install, there are a bunch of playbooks that get run. So if I need to bring up something like, if I want to bring up the head node, there's a prep head node playbook that gets called. So it runs a bunch of roles that configure interfaces and Docker and various things. So that's part of how this is done. If we go back to cord and you go into orchestration, there's an XOS container, there's an XOS folder, which is where all the XOS software is. And what you're probably most interested in is the services, because that's what this is about. It's about making services for XOS. So if you go into XOS services, you'll see all of these things that are all the different services we can use in XOS. So remember, when we look back at this, you see things like address manager, fabric, ONOS, and VTN. We have address manager, ONOS service, fabric, and VTN service. They don't always have a one-to-one correspondence between the directory name and the name in GUI, but this is where you would go to put your service to get it brought onto cord. So what we're going to be focusing on is this template service here. This is an example that we created. We also have an example service, but this shows how the template service comes together. So the template service as distributed isn't a complete version of the example service, but we're going to show you how you go about augmenting it so it is. Let's see here. Okay. Documentation all the documentation for 4.0 and later has been moved to a site called guide.opencore.org. This is where you should go for all of your documentation for developing report. If you look in here, developing report, there's something on the example service. There's how workflows for working with the various configurations, how to get the source code, all configuring XOS. There's a bunch on how to deploy, how to troubleshoot. There's just an immense amount of information. We spent a lot of time trying to get this to be as good as it could possibly be for this release, because this is a really developer-focused release. We want to make everybody who tries to use Word as successful as they possibly can be. So we have a Google Doc that covers the rest of the tutorial. If people could go to that site, I also wrote it up here. So it's kbgoo.gl, kb5, little o, capital XP, and you'll get it a Google Doc. Alright. Okay, so we're going to customize the template service in this. So just be aware, you probably have write permission on this. Don't delete something that you don't want. It wouldn't be good. So the way that XOS works, we define our models using an xproto file. If you've heard Scott or Soppin's talks about xproto and creating services, that's the file that one of the files they were talking about. So in this demo, we're not going to actually have you run the whole tool chain of XOS GenX and generating some folders and tweaking folders and those sorts of things. We're going to have you modify an existing template service in place and onboard our modified service. There are two options. I can walk you through this, or you can take the documentation and run with it and ask us if you have trouble with any of the steps. I'm going to be slowly working through the steps, so I recommend that you it depends. How do people want to do things? Or also, are there any questions so far about what we did? Has everybody been able to do all of this, get into their nodes, look at stuff? Okay. So we're going to start off by customizing the service model. So the model is what stores the various bits of data you want to synchronize to your VNF. And we're going to do that by going into this directory. So port orchestration, XOS services, template services, XOS. So on your machine, not in the head node. If you're in the head node, you should exit out. And this is your SSH in the head node. So go into this directory and look for a file called service.xproto. And then you want to make you want to add some lines to this service. What we're really adding here is these required string message sections there. So what this is there's a template service which derives from service, and then we have a template service instance which is an instance of the template service. And what's going to happen is this is going to set up a web server, and then we're going to create a file that you could think of as if you had a VNF that would be like a configuration file. It gets put into that web server, and then we're going to be able to use curl to access that file. And so you can see how you can put a file into your service and then have it be used by your VNF. In this case, it's sort of an arbitrary example. We're just using Apache and serving the web page, but it's the same as if you were to put a config file into your VNF. So you go through, so the first step is to edit your service.xproto file. Has everyone managed to find this file? Okay, nodding heads, I'm happy. I cut and paste these text strings here, or you can cut and paste this section wholesale and can save that file. Okay, so that's the modeling side of things. That's all you have to do to create your model is add those lines to the file. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to customize the service synchronizer. So the service synchronizer is what takes the data out, or takes information out of the data model and applies it to a running VNF. And the way that we use that.
I have a question about the previous step.
Oh yes, go ahead.
Is there, what's required? What's the minimal required
Technically, you could synchronize nothing, and it would be what existed before, which was just the name. It wouldn't do anything, but you need to have.
So I could have, for example, just the service.
You just have the service, the service, and I think the verbose name is required, but I think that's it. So, if you want to have more information about what is required, what can be put in an Xproto file, about some of the other things that we use Xproto for, that's Scott and Solomon's talks earlier about services are probably the best place to look, or the guide. So the service synchronizer takes the data out of the data model, runs it runs a synchronizer container, which then checks the data model. If there's a change or something that needs to be instantiated, it goes out and performs that change. So in this case, the synchronizer we're writing takes those message text fields out of the data model, runs an Ansible playbook that puts a index or puts a web page file into a VNF image, which in this case is just a VM running Apache, and then it starts Apache, and the Apache comes up, and then you can look at it, you can go and fetch the web page for it and see if there are any changes. So we're going to go through the steps of all.
I have a question. So why did we, in the previous step, in the model definition, why did we choose to have a service and an instance? So for this, if the demo is to just have an Apache come out with.
So think of it this way. Let's say you wanted to have one of the things we wanted to show is relationships between services. And by having a service and then an instance of the service, you could have a VNF where you have global config that's over all of your service instances, or all of your service instances, and then specific config for each service instance. So, for example, if you were to have let's say you had like.
I understand.
Right.
So basically, I could have Apache service, and then instance 1 could have a message. Hey, I'm instance 1, instance 2 have okay, I'm instance 2, instance, and these would be go and the instances, and the global would be.
Yeah, and the global could have some common configuration.
But is there something special about them, about it coming from service or coming from instance? That looks like it's using inheritance of service. And
right, so those service and inheritance those have other models inside of XQuest that have some either functionality that exists in them. So for example, one of them descended from tenant with container. And tenant with container, what that means is a VM, which is a tenant which is related to another service. And with container means a VM image. So instantiate VMs on my behalf if I'm a descendant of tenant with container. If it's just service, all that exists is in the data model. That doesn't actually go out and instantiate a VM image. So there are a variety of different things you can descend from that have that encapsulate other functionality.
So you can think of the service object as the global configuration for that service, and the service instance as the configuration for that particular service for a particular subscriber.
No, I understand that. It's just, I guess I'm wondering what is actually, so what is statically enforced that I do not do? For example, could I just implement everything as a service? Have no other models, but have everything just in a cell in the service, and have it like a matrix in the service of values per instance, and then have a synchronizer that just pulls stuff out of this service. So would there be something wrong with that, other than ugliness?
You could have, so the synchronizer model needs to have, there needs to be something that in the data model that says, when one of these exists, I need to create another object, or I need to go out and synchronize to some external.
So from a technical perspective, you can absolutely just have a service. For the modeling practice, we are always separating service from the service instance, and if you need just one instance, you'll have
So
just
so this is basically, these are not first class objects, these are in a sense libraries.
Yeah.
There is nothing
The data
first
center.
class about service or tenant with container. These happen to be libraries of models that happen to be preloaded. And there's presumably just like one root.
XOS base is the
XOS base is the only first order object.
There are a ton of other XOS pen models and XOS proto files. If you look in, what is it, orchestration XOS,
orchestration,
Yeah,
XOS, core models, core
you can see all of the different models that are expressed in XProto.
Okay.
So, alrighty, any other questions?
So is tenant with container, is that by default an open stack VM with that comes up with a container?
Right, and it's you can specify, and we're going to later specify the actual image to instantiate it.
It's actually just OpenStack VM.
So
Okay, it's just an open stack VM, okay.
It's something that needs a rename.
Okay, so we're going to go through what is involved in making a synchronizer. So go into right now you're in template service XOS.
So it seems like my node just disappeared. Is that,
Did you switch?
I was in the middle of a session and it just.
Did you switch Wi-Fi networks?
Oh,
Yep,
look at
you
that.
switched to Wi-Fi networks. Okay. So right now you're in XOS services template services XOS. Go into the synchronizer steps directly. You'll see two files in there. One is sync service instance.py and sync service instance underscore playbook.yaml. So the first is the service instance is a Python file that was I think auto-generated from the XProto with the XOS Gen X tool. We're going to add the add fields from the model to that. So you'll see near the bottom of the file it'll have a section that says get extra attributes. You want to cut and paste this bit of code there. And what this does, this provides two fields to when Ansible is invoked. And what this is, and these are the message from the service instance and the parent service. So you're running self-get service, so the parent service message. So you'll have access to both the instance message and the overall service message. And then once you've done that, we're going to write the playbook that actually uses these services. So this sync service interest is what gets run every time when the service or when XOS determines that the service needs to be resynchronized. So you make a change in the GUI, you load new Tosca that creates a new instance. It'll eventually, that data model change will result in the synchronizer getting run again and that will run these sync steps. Then the
I
next thing,
see get service here, self get service of the object that's being passed in. That means that service is a first order entity.
so you have because self is descending from sync instance using Ansible further. That's a model of the.
Right, but it's getting service out of
And actually, it's not
okay,
Oh,
so
So the next thing you'll see is that there's the service instance playbooks. Who here is familiar with Ansible or has used Ansible before? So Ansible's a way of running, of creating tasks and playbooks that run various commands on the system. What this does is it connects to a specific host, and it has two variables. One is the service instance message, one is the service message. And what it's doing is it has a task that takes a template file and writes it to a specific location, and then starts patching. The template file will take these service instance message and service message and put them in the index HTML file when this template task is run. So edit the file to do this. By default, it has a ping task. You can choose to keep that or delete it. Okay, and in that previous one, we referred to a template, but that template doesn't exist. So we're going to go make a new template directory. So get out of the steps directory, so up one, cd dot, make dir the templates directory, and go into the templates directory, and then we want to create a file called index.html.j2. And it's going to contain these two. In these two lines. Okay, let me know when you're done with that. Okay, everybody, everybody's good? Okay, so now we're going to add the service description. So we've just finished all the things related to making the service synchronizer and adding data to the model. Now we have to go through and work through the build system for adding the service description and the VM image to the profile. So the VM image is your VNF that you've wrapped in like a glance image for OpenStack. Eventually we'll offer container-based VNFs and that sort of stuff. This is what's working right now. A profile is like mcord, ecord, and rcord. It describes all the services. So let's go to this directory. So cord, build, platform install, profile methods, and on your system should be until then. Now note that you're not on the head node, you're on your development node here. And if you ls in that folder, you'll see that there are a bunch of different profiles for eCord and mCord and rCord, and there's also one called BaseCord. We're using BaseCord. So you're going to VI BaseCord.
If I'm using
Or you're using BaseCord in this set.
if I'm using Onboard, I have
Yeah,
Onboard.
what do you say?
It would say,
You would modify rCord if you're doing that. We haven't tested that. If it breaks.
No, we actually tested because I
Okay.
deployed the wrong node.
Okay, so in BaseCord you'll see something under, there are a bunch of, this is a YAML file. So there, under XOS services, you'll see a couple lines that add the template service. To add the template service to the profile. So uncomment out these 3 lines. There's a 4th line above that is a comment, leave it a comment. And then further down, there's a thing for XOS images. You'll need to add these lines to XOS images. You can either replace or add to it. There's one right now that I think is named Trusty Server Multi-Nick. But this would be the VNF image you would include with your system. And so this is the process of adding your service to the profile that Cord loads. Okay, and there's one more change that's needed. There's also a section called XOS New Tosca Config Templates. You need to uncomment, and I think it's commented, so uncomment those 2 lines. So this is a Tosca file that gets templated and loaded. We can look at, I can show you where it is in the next step. But this is a Tosca file that is loaded that covers the instructions to actually instantiate your VNF image.
So all that those files is doing is actually creating some models
Right. It creates
in XOS.
instances of the template service and template services.
So wait, where's this?
Okay.
So is this already there?
That's the next step. That's this. So this is the last change you make to BaseCord YAML file. So write that out. Actually, I need to do it too, because I want my changes to be accurate. One other thing you'll notice is that we have a checksum here. We checksum the images so that we make sure that they don't get mangled. Okay, so now we're going to go edit the template service YAML file, which is the one that gets loaded here in the XOS New Tosca config templates. It's J2, it's a Jinja template, and it runs through Ansible, which does some variable replacement on it. So we go back down into roles, Cord profile, templates, and if you ls in the Cord profile templates directory, you'll see that there are a whole lot of different templates for all the different services. So, template service, you'll see that a lot of the models are brought in, including template service and template service instance. What we're going to do here is we're going to change the name that we use, or the VNF image for Trusty Server Multi-Nick to my VNF image. And that my VNF image is the same one as from this XOS images. So I would do a find and replace or manually search for Trusty Server Multi-Nick and change it to my VNF image. There should be 3 instances of that in the file. Okay. Okay, so, so now that you've done that, you've just told, or you've just changed the Tosca to set the name of the VNF image that you want to use. In this tutorial, we made and we stubbed out an existing service. And if you were doing this from scratch, you'd make a bunch of other changes. Don't do any of these for this tutorial. Actually, most of these are going to be handled automatically very soon by the rest of the build system. We have a whitelist for whitelisting images, that controls which images are built and downloaded. We have a thing for, we add things to the manifest. You have to have a Git repo for our image building thing to work properly. We're working on streamlining the process. This is what you'd have to do now if you're making a brand new service. You don't have to do it for the demo because of how we're distributing this. So, now that you've made those changes, we're going to onboard the service. And so these are build system commands. If you go into the cord build directory, we're going to run these 4 main commands. The first one is XOS teardown. What this does is it stops and destroys the XOS containers, and then and it basically when in that process of destroying them, it also destroys the database. So if you made any changes to your XOS, it will wipe them out. But it's needed because we've made changes to the data model, and because we made changes to the data model, we have to rebuild XOS. So if you run that, it'll probably take a minute or so to run. The next one is clean profile, because remember how we changed things in the core profile directory? The clean profile will delete and recreate the core profile. Then we run make build. And the way that these work in terms of build system commands, XOS teardown and clean profile, when we run a build, the build system creates files called milestones, which are make targets. XOS teardown actually runs some commands, but clean profile, you notice all it does is remove some milestones. Then when you run make build again, those commands to reach those milestones will be rerun, and you'll get back to the same, you'll get back to a running system with XOS. Additionally, there's one other command, make compute node refresh. This is because this re-adds the OpenStack compute VMs to your XOS instance. This is because with our system, we use mass to create VMs. We use mass to create VMs, and we use mass to bring up OpenStack. And those OpenStack nodes are brought in automatically by mass. But when you rip down XOS, you have to then re-add them, and that's what compute node refresh does. It re-adds the compute nodes to the XOS instance.
So XOS teardown doesn't tear down the compute nodes.
Does not tear down the compute nodes. So if you have a VNF running in OpenStack, it won't tear that down or destroy it.
So what's controlled?
Nothing is controlling that. It's been instantiated, but XOS teardown doesn't include a go through all the instances and delete them all. That has been a feature request. But right now, if there's think of it this way. You wouldn't want the system your XOS crashes, let's say, or the machine running it gets disconnected. You wouldn't want the system to automatically remove all of the running parts.
That depends what type of invariants you want to parent.
Yeah. So
If your invariants are like, oh, the best thing we can do will be happening, or if your invariants are, we guarantee that what is in the model is there, then yeah, it needs to go down.
So a lot of these decisions were design decisions made a while ago, and also in terms of practicality, the
You don't have to explain.
no. Well, cleanup wise, there's a lot of like what's the best thing to do, and we want to support multiple different models of cleaning up after, but we don't necessarily want to force people into any one.
So I had an instance running, and I did the XOS tear down, and the instance did not go away, which you explained why is unique, the post-effect instance, right? I did XOS tear down, so now no XOS services are running, the OpenStack synchronizers is not running. So when I bring up XOS again, doing rebuild, that, nothing's controlling this instance anymore, right?
Right, that is correct.
Okay.
So, and if you were to go through and load Oscar, it would recreate that, it would create a new instance.
And so
No,
that
it would not
orphan just
It would,
go.
that would, Orphan would just keep on.
Okay.
There's been thought of making it so that when a service, you'll be able to say, tell a service, create yourself, and it will go through and delete everything in its instance before it. Previously, we actually had a bug where you could delete something in the XOS interface and it wouldn't clean up after itself.
Yeah.
And that obviously is a bug.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between an explicit delete and just the service not running, being running anymore and never having to actually delete from the data model.
Right, because I would imagine my data plane for this instance, the ESG instance, is still up and running, even though access is down.
Right.
Because the OpenStack networking side of it, OBS is still running, so the data path will still be running, right?
So this will take 10-15 minutes. I'm not sure we have break time right now, but you can definitely, if you want to take a break, take a break. Because as long as it's running on the build section, the build is going to take 10 or 15 minutes because it has to go through, generate all the config again, build all the containers again that's being changed, and load up the data model. I'm going to take this opportunity to this.
We'll cut off.
I'm trying to.
I am not familiar enough with what first off typo 120001. Or no, you're right. Yeah, I'm wrong. I'm reading things.
No, you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
When you make that relationship, I'm not sure whether you need that reality direction.
Did the first time and see.
I would have to, while I have written this before, I don't remember all of the syntax.
Could anyone
Additionally,
Shut down.
trying to understand?
what that is.
Yeah. Zach, can we ask you a question?
Yes.
If you want, we can try to switch.
Yeah, he's doing some data modeling stuff that's beyond the. Yes.
This experiment already begins. The core dev and the node were completely done. They shut off.
Midway through. Well, that's strange. I don't know what's going on there. So they're shut off there. Did the machine restart?
My machine?
Yeah, did that machine.
I don't think so.
You're still SSH?
Yeah. Did you stay SSH in the whole time?
Did something with no, it's fine.
If not SSH, it doesn't respond.
Oh, that's very strange. What's
So
all
what they gonna do?
So, there's milestones to this, so
I'm trying
some big job.
to
attempt to use Vagrant to bring up those machines. And once it's finished with this, that's the way that it would be.
Because normally, that's separated, because otherwise you have services that depends on each other. So what
Hopefully that will work. I don't know what happened
we
to your
have
system,
the
unfortunately.
the service instance
It's like a bigger problem, huh?
that we use to connect.
The liver thing is,
It's
it works most of the time,
Yeah.
but when it doesn't work,
So we
it's
use
Yeah.
the relation service instance. And that creates one of those models saying these two particular instances are connected together. Because otherwise we have an dependency between the two services and not one without the other.
Is this?
The link as a service.
Well,
The model is already there, we just need to
can we
create,
pull up the colon?
create the data to connect.
Yeah, that's correct, but you have to do, which amp of,
You can create the
we'll do global price
state service.yaml
before that.
file, the Tosca file, or you can create it.
I think you have to be, and that's in search, you're in search mode.
Okay.
So I think you have to colon to do that. To try that, just they were trying to see what happened. Okay, so, colon to get into command mode. Okay, then the amp s slash, yeah. You don't need the G at the end, I don't think. Okay. Everybody chugging away except for this one?
Is it expected to happen during the?
Yeah, you also will get a thing that delays that says XOS Chameleon is ready to be running. What that is XOS just was brought up, the services was made. It does all of this startup thing of creating data models, building all of the, building all this
What is happening is
relationships.
that the core container came up, is running migration on the database. Once it's done running migration, it will expose gRPC API. Chameleon came up at the same time as the core and is trying to connect to the gRPC API, but the gRPC API is not there yet.
What he said.
So I got an error
Yeah. What's your error?
on port profile. Error.
Okay, so your template service didn't load. So mapping values are not allowed in this context in Unicode string, line 80, column 27. So likely typo in your template service.yaml. Now what you'll have to redo those commands.
I need to find the typo first.
First find the typo, then.
So where did you see this error that we quoted? And where is this error coming from?
So what's going on is you're trying to load a Tosca file into the Tosca interface. Is that one the mapping value one first?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're basically sending a YAML file to the Tosca engine, and that is probably a different character or
Yeah, you
space
might have
the parser will not pass.
or a tab or
And where's the template service again?
that was the template service, the template service YAML.json. Platform install, roles, source profile,
Components. Oh, that's a bill.
or
That is taking a
Platform
little
install.
too long. Normally it takes like 2 or 3.
and then
So
course profile, I think.
can you have a document?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you open this new panel?
So what's all that? What's the template service?
Yes, it's a just add one.
But wait, this is.
Okay.
Yeah. And
This is the,
logs,
this is not the YAML file.
Right, it's a J2, it's a J2.
Oh, right, that's what we added.
base course,
So you have
you
some
can come to direct size core.
live VMX
Does it expect space here?
in there. Yes,
Oh my god.
There is
yes. Welcome to YAML. Yeah. We could go back to XML, wanna do that?
Right?
Is that YAML or is that?
I think it's usually, I think it doesn't, it requires colon.
Fast ähnlich aus.
Should be description, access and export services.
Okay,
And so wait, now I have to,
service.
you have to rerun, these. I think there's a possible way to do it nonetheless, but somebody had the same issue you had.
so I need to add this files.
You could just try running maybe the profile.
That is what it's from.
I mean, that's what I would expect, is a.
Oh,
But there's a
I think
copy
you
that happens after you create the profile with a copy
line.
embed now.
Let's
So your
Yeah,
changes
me
won't
fine.
actually get over. Make the profile locally and then copy it over,
yeah,
which I think make clean profile and then pick build will probably get you working.
we should see those lines. Available.
So this one's you can choice next time.
Okay. Did you get your replacement? Good, okay. And you're through,
Is it all what we
building.
lines is
Okay,
beginning those
when you're
lines.
done building, log into the XOS GUI.
Yeah, currently is also building
And now
Yeah,
we
stacks.
go back in cross building, yeah, we can stop the top one.
Did it clean?
Yeah,
You're down, this is started, right?
now we need to do the tear down.
You're down.
So, because what's happening is that
That's normal.
what's
That's
happening
normal.
is that
That's
we have
normal.
the,
What's going
core
on is waiting for
container.
the data model to be ready.
and we are
So,
putting
it
some-
says 30 retries.
some models we generate from the core inside there, so we need to
That's-
reveal
it's
the
not-
container and spin up the
I
new
wish it
one.
didn't say
We need to
failed
tear it down.
retries. It was more like waiting. Yeah.
Why I need
Okay,
to
cool.
a square, inside a square.
Not a bug, a feature. Okay.
See some Python stack dumps and then we make processes this.
There's a Python error. Occasionally you'll see during the when it's building images, it'll do a stack trace because I'm not currently catching it when there's a 404 error when it pulls from Docker Hub. I should catch it and make it be like I just wasn't able to find it, but right now it's printing a stack trace. Just say image builder was hurried out and they shipped me to China.
Jetzt komme ich auch zu dem Punkt. Ich habe noch 30 vor mir.
It's by accepting.
Oh, no.
So we can restore the file.
It's still trying to
Yeah, but the problem is that you can't reach Docker images, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
This is you had the problem with the machine where it was down.
Glaube ich, schau mal vor.
Look up problem.
Noch zu arbeiten.
It's okay. Okay. So it is the system provided.
Yeah.
So das heißt, man nicht das ist cool.
Ich habe es mir geholt, weil ich einen Vertragsänderung gemacht habe. Keiner ist verbraucht und da habe ich gedacht, ja, nicht.
How did his resolve.conf came undone again?
Huh?
His resolve.conf came undone on this node. So we had a problem where
Zwei Monate danach ist mein Handy dann gegangen und ich dachte, nie gebraucht hätte.
Das haben wir geschafft auf dem Konzert. Ein iPhone 4S, also schon länger her. Bauen zu können. Das war schmerzhaft. Nächsten Tag Frankfurt im Apple Store rein.
it says don't change.
Ich habe mal geweint, weil du so viel Geld ausgegeben hast.
Remember that specific thing?
Yep.
The IP address to use?
Yeah, it's in the mittlerweile.
Yeah, I know. Can somebody who's on another node?
Ich glaube, ich werde
let's see
das
what-
weitermachen. Ich werde wahrscheinlich wohl, weil
Ich finde
Oh,
auch das.
I need the one on not that node.
Ja,
So control.
ja, man muss nur lang genug warten. Überall. Probieren.
Not on that node, on the develop.
Und haben die 100-fachen Ressourcen und das Ganze.
Hard to type.
Yeah.
Just a second.
One read file left.
I think this is and 128.0.1.
So, 21.
The French words. So the ušte trošku configuration again is default config the milestone.
She just needs to rerun the new task again.
Yeah.
I think maybe if you just run, you might have to run all the commands, but if you run just clean profile and build, it might work. So you might, yeah, I think it's working now.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so have people gotten through this and gotten through compute node refresh?
So did you
Is
30 read files are not enough.
What?
Should be much faster.
Is it just taking a long time?
Because we're not taking down the containers.
I'm just trying it again, so just rerun the playbook, but
Oh, it
fails.
hung on the thing. You might have an error in your. Yeah, it's possible.
okay.
Come over here and let me see. Oh, so it's freaked out here. You're in. What is this? I think. So the gRPC endpoint. What's the name of the gRPC endpoint container again?
It's export.
It's still. So it's still building. Expected, required, optional, or repeated. Expected compromise. I think you may have a mistake in the X-proto file that we changed a while ago.
Yeah, this was the first file on this.
It was one of the first ones. I would go and make sure that is the same.
What's that?
Just
typo.
It looks like there's syntax. Expected.
Oh yeah, there's an error in this as well.
So go find that. You'll have to cancel this and that. Okay, go give that a shot. Yep. And then you're going to have to do a full Exos teardown again.
So dann muss ich ja den Background.
Nur bei mir ist Typo.
Has anyone gotten to the point where they can load back into the Exos GUI after their rebuild?
Wahrscheinlich mag er Dinge nicht. Das ist ein Exposure wahrscheinlich versuchen, wenn man das.
Just the password, the file, the password.
It's in tilde chord base or tilde chord build platform install credentials XOS.
Aber ich meinst, nächstes Jahr Produktion. 4.1 ist alles besser, oder?
Wieso Juni? Ist das der Plan?
Weiß ich nicht. Wenn es läuft, dann läuft es. Ja, dann haben wir da.
Ja, das benutzt man ja nicht.
Ich finde die Alternative, das was dieses gerade abliefert, ist auch nicht schön. Bis jetzt im Gipfel.
Okay. Ja, ich habe vorhin gefragt,
That's
Finden
the
wir Connection,
part of the file inside the container.
wo ist
We need
unser
to go back to the
eines Voting und
we need to go back to the node.
solltest du halt das
And then that file will be in bullet one folder. That will be in orchestration. That will need to be indented with
Und am Ende von dem ganzen Output Error steht. Oder wenn irgendwo so steht.
Okay. Now let's go back to build. Just cd build. Now to cd build.
Yes.
Okay, now then we make XOS.
Okay, so your chameleon turned out. So most likely what's going on is you have a problem with your X profile. So
And make but also make the
ahead. Logs.
let's do a make build.
X. No problem. What's this base? So you have a syntax error in your X protocol. You didn't. I think you might have deleted more than you needed to in that. Or
What is
this is from the invalid syntax in the.
Yeah, you removed also the emphasis for the label and the name option from the top of the X profile.
So you need to go back and do that and then rerun that.
Okay.
Okay, you can do a default and it will show. Just go exit the go in the console access underscore services. Template service. Source. Just go ahead and work git space. This device.
So I'm assuming that if I do Nova list, it should show something there.
It should show something there. It takes a few minutes to bring up everything.
Did you run the compute?
Yeah, it showed up there.
The instance. Okay, now go in under instances.
Go under notes.
There is
Did you go to notes?
good notes. Okay, you need to make
You
to
did.
make a
free API.
That that's it.
Okay.
No, that's from the. That's from the div.
Because when we repeat the search, we wipe it out the database, so we need to
Yes, you.
load the data again. Otherwise, the OpenStack doesn't know where to deploy this.
Which SSH client is that? Which SSH client is this?
Reload the page.
It's also the first time for me.
So what happens is that we remove the session ID from the database without clearing it from the browser, so it was stuck in the cache.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not good. Let's check the other one. Perfect. You have something under instances.
Okay.
Good. And you know at least management tenants, and you can type ping it to use
Das war zum Beispiel dann ausprobiert, ich will
you should be able to see it.
Sorry, didn't get the size part.
So now we have deployed the VM
Okay.
and configured it, and we can
The first one,
we have one success.
the first one was a disaster. This one's going really well. You guys got the good one. It's such a- For all the problems you're having, do you know that you're having more success than most people?
I had to add web service image to the Docker images file.
You shouldn't need to.
Well, because I had another profile installed. I
Das ist ja
had
nicht
to-
das Problem, das ist
Oh, yeah.
So when I built it,
So,
it
ja,
built
schon.
it.
Das quasi bei
Okay, yes.
You know, this stuff was trying to figure that out, so.
You saw the step without having that.
Yeah.
Und nur an der Stelle.
Es sollte schon sagen, dass es ein sinnvolles Error-Wissen direkt
Genau, ganz einfach. Das ist jetzt nicht das Problem hier von dem, also von der Schanzenlücke. Das ist eher ein Problem von dem Ding im Hintergrund, das hier
Complaining about mixing the repository.
Oh, is it?
The key error access manager. Key error. What?
But that dude, the evening, what did you name?
Isn't it Monday?
What did you
I don't know. I'm not going to join the. No, not that much. I feel sorry I didn't so much in the last month that my wife required my presence.
Ja, macht zumindest weiter.
This is a logical group of instances. It is not a network slice.
Okay.
It's just how we group and connect.
There's a.
It has nothing to do with the
Yeah.
file.
And so using
Yes, you put the anchor.
Okay. And in order to work
So,
with clouds,
Wo ist positiv?
Das ist so ein Feeling.
Calling the cloud, what do you mean?
because the ones
You're right. For that.
Yeah, I just
Increase the.
I have never used it.
Because you guys here.
Funktionen,
Yes.
So if you
End,
do you understand this?
also eine
You can just
Funktion
use
so zu nennen.
yourself.
and we included
Das wäre eine Konfliktfrei.
So Nova still says nothing.
No, it still says nothing.
Neue
Do
HOS.
you have your VM use, does Cord know, or does XOS know about your
Oh,
Those.
does?
Here, building,
So an instance,
installing the virtual for
okay.
all the thing. The server you need. Actually,
go back
you need a bit less access than this.
Okay.
So the servers were running this one on update and
try to,
I'm gonna come on
Genau, wie gesagt, wobei jetzt noch ein Monat was ist.
I might reinforce it.
Dann steht das Ding wahrscheinlich nicht wie mein normaler PC.
Yeah.
Start then.
Okay. Today with Kurz, what we are going to
Ich weiß nicht, bis man mit 2 Rechnern
It may take a little bit for that.
because you have from the Kurz and
Bis vor
what
einem
else?
Jahr ungefähr.
In order to install it on the
Also habe ich immer 2 Laptops, einen für meine E-Mails, einen nur für meine E-Mails und einen für
So that one will install background on your computer and run
Und jetzt machen wir uns übers Internet
exercise and almost and things
E-Mail,
like background.
Laptop,
But use one type of install one for a computer.
Yeah.
Ja.
Thank you.
Also jetzt wieder.
Sorry. How'd that work? Maybe I'll just tell you. I'll just tell you.
Facing the issue with the French keyboard, right?
Which keyboard is this?
French.
Is this French too? Okay.
These guys have too many accents. There are too many keys.
I should go get the keyboard that I had on Monday. Bring that out and see what people do.
So we can.
Das kann
Oh. Sorry.
Kannst du es nochmal?
So my boot process was successfully. So
Okay.
so maybe and now I just
Okay.
source the credentials.
Okay, let's-
the credentials for.
Yeah, it takes a while to come up. Let's see if everything is okay. Let's go to the GUI.
Oh, you moved this directly moved somewhere.
Two instances.
I don't know how they got moved. The address manager server
Reload big
directory got moved.
It's not.
Access admin @concord.org.
So I have to find this directory and put it right.
Password. /credential. No, it is /pt credential access.
I think you are on the wrong screen.
No, you can if it's copied over the password, so you can /.
Underscore services. Switch it back to
Credentials. Access admin.
services. And then you want to move that's hypercache, with services hypercache, address manager to the current.
Okay, because we have destroyed the backend without closing the client for so the session, the previous session is stuck.
Move address manager,
No instances.
address
Can
manager.
you go on your nodes?
We have moved.
Link service and see.
Now go back and do it.
So somehow something
should call Nova or
Yeah.
OpenStack.
Yeah.
or-
Something should. Dotted, yes. Dotted log, sorry.
Okay, thanks.
No, but I don't see an error here.
There's
It's
for
not
the
under
experts,
DNF image was not added.
also expert template.
So no file system founding parameter was given to create image. So that's with the Tosca file that you had.
Yeah, I was just looking at it again.
Can you run a git diff on that file?
We have a syntax
It's a
error.
hierarchy, so you have to get like one directly file
Nice,
and
cool.
run git diff
Line
on the specific
61.
file.
Yeah.
You have to be within the git
Oh,
parameter
God.
because tilde is git is not.
So what do I do?
So just go all the way to
That the part of the file inside the container.
particular file.
Here,
Okay.
it is in development folder.
Core build platform install roles for
And it is in restriction. Access underscore services. Template,
git
service,
diff.
source, synchronizer, steps.
I thought it wasn't this directory, sorry.
My DNS image, name, my DNS image. Sync, it looks like we did it right. Did you did not change it in the.
It's somewhere.
You didn't add on the my DNS image to the export text.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Oh,
Scroll in the scroll down a little. Right there, access images. That needs to be in the base. That needs to
I
be
think
base.
there is an extra space in the beginning.
File, profiles.
Should be 4 spaces. There you are.
Platform install slash profile manifests.
Yeah.
And then they need to be 4. Now it should be okay. Yeah.
Very bottom. Okay.
So now I have to rebuild, right?
Yeah, but we don't need to tear it down because that file is not in the core.
Those lines should go away.
So just go back to
Those
the
other three lines should show up.
Okay, now you can do make extract update images. Okay, and make it.
Okay,
We just build the synchronizer image to take shorter than
Yes.
getting down everything.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm not sure how far people have gotten. Some people I think have gotten all the way through, some people haven't.
Yeah.
Okay, so, verifying,
The good point is that most of them have already gone through the developer loop to fix syntax error in the synchronizer.
yeah, good, so we don't have to do this again. So let's verify that the service has been onboarded. So if you log into the Access page, let's see here. You should see that there's now a template service object here. And the Tosca created created an instance of template service. And if we look at debug, it says when it was created, when it was enacted, and when it was released as checked to see if it ran. So it took like 6 minutes from it to when it was created to when it was active. See that it shows that a node, you have a node here, you have a slice here that contains my VNF image, that's the template service. If you then go over, one of the next steps is to see if the VM has been created. So over here, what I did, what you're supposed to do is run SSH to the head node,
source this file, which gets your OpenStack credentials, and then run novel list all tenants. And what that does is that lists the tenant, all the different VMs that are running. So in this case, you'll see here's this VM, my site template 1. It's running. It has a management network and a public network. So we want to see if we can see what our what changes have been made to our into that Apache server. And so then what we'll do is we can run curl and using the fabric interface because that's where the public network is fabric. And you see this and HTTP and then the IP address, and you'll see that I got my VNF service, and there's no service message and no service instance message. So we're going to go back to the interface. We're going to go to the template service. We're going to go to template services. We're going to grab the template. We're going to add a message, and I'm going to just do hi from. We're going to save that. And then template service instances. We're going to record build.
Not log out, save.
Yeah. And so template instance successfully saved. Are we going to get pop-ups for when it runs? Yeah.
Yep.
So you might see some other pop-ups from when it runs. And if we go back here to debug, are these updating? Will these update live?
Yeah, they should.
Okay. So let's see here. Hey, look, there's my config, the synchronizer ran that Ansible playbook, and applied it to the VNF image, and you can see hi from word build as the message. There's so you can see data flowing from the GUI all the way through to the to an instantiated service. And you can go ahead and change this now. If you change just the service message without updating the service instance message, it won't update because the update is keyed on the service instance. So it doesn't, changing the service message doesn't force a resync of all the service instances. You can get that functionality if you, there are ways to program the models so that it works that way. So the next thing is changing the service configuration. This is what we just did. We just saved the, changed the message fields, click save, and it worked. So now we can modify the service synchronizer. We can go ahead and edit that index.html.j2 file. And let me do that. So I'm back on the switch. So I'm going to go to directory. Oh, it's not that easy. So this change to the synchronizer template. Okay, and I think that was all. So I added a different line than this one. Maybe I'll just add this line just for.
I think no one will be upset if you add a different line.
So I did that. I'm going to go to Code Build and I'm going to update the images. Now you'll see that because I didn't make a data model change, I don't have to do the whole XOS teardown step. So cd dash. And also, you'll notice that the things I changed in the XOS interface are going to be retained, because the XOS database isn't blown away when all I do just say update images.
So this update image, rebuild the
Docker images.
all Docker images?
Yeah. But it won't get down in the database.
And because it won't, the model didn't change, so there's no need to upload it on the database. Okay, and
hopefully that will work, and then I'll run curl again, and see. If until I'm running, you'll see I still have the old one. Wait for that to finish. Okay, does anyone have questions? Or are people waiting for their things to still rebuild?
So some of you have already gone through this make express update images, make build. That what you do anytime you make a change to something that is not in the data model that doesn't need to apply migration to the database. Soon, we don't know how soon, but soon you won't have to destroy the database to make changes to the data model.
Right. Or at
As
least,
soon as God managed to convince
yes.
Sarah that
that it's a priority, yeah. There are two parts of that. There's onboarding new services and then updating existing services. So dynamic onboarding is probably going to happen first. Updating existing, because if you could have an incompatible change to your data model, we don't have migration support yet, so that's much more complicated. And just adding a new service is a lot simpler than modifying an existing service. Excuse me. So it's pushing images. Okay, did people find this helpful? Yeah. Yeah, a lot of stuff. We intend to make this easier, but it's good that you have seen the process. Most of the make commands are going to stay the same. You might have to do a little bit less on some of the for some of the other commands.
In this template service, where did you define the network slice? You know, you came up by default with the management network and public network.
I believe that's in the Tosca file you edited that. Tosca template service. Yeah.
And so there's a default network slice that.
Yeah. I think it is network slices.
So in the Tosca that you push, you define a slice for your service, and by default the slices are attached to the management and the public network.
Yeah. Or I think you can specify it.
But you can take a look at it.
So we can look at that. Okay, so
Dann steht da das drin, was ich
let's see, it has a management network, court slice, it has relationships, service, VNF, my site, and so then template slice has some public and management networks.
Yeah.
Right, makes sense.
Now, when we onboarded the service, Outlook by default without creating a service instance, or no, when we onboarded it, it was, when it's onboarded, it's supposed to come up by default with mission services, right?
No,
So the onboarding process will mean to
There's marker back.
So this is this thing in the court slices here. This actually creates that slice, and then further on down where it says the court service instance template service instance. That's where the court service instance got created.
So the onboarding process will be to put the model definition inside the core and to spin up the synchronizer for that service. Then through currently not bound, in this case via Tosca, we are pushing down instruction to create one instance of this service, and then with the synchronizer deploy the VM.
So then how come like when we onboard, like when we deployed XOS, right, we turned on deployed it first, how come VSG didn't come up with a instance?
Hmm?
How come the VSG service didn't come up with an instance?
So the profile manifest has to include the VSG, and then that would also include a Tosca file that would bring up the VSG, and you'll probably find that those exist in RCord. The RCord profile manifest, but not in the base Word.
You in the base code you will have the VSP itself. But in Arcor, by default, when you bring it up, you just get the VSP synchronizer and the VSG model definition.
Yeah.
Then you have the pod test playbook that create
So,
VSG.
so
A subscriber VSP, etc.
okay, so my thing finished building. So I'm going to go into the interface, and I'm going to save, and then that'll trigger the service synchronizer, which I've updated to use my new. So over here, I've also going to change. Let's add a little escalation point. We can save, and then I should be able to go back to. And curl. It may take a little bit. Oh, there it is. This is the text I added to the synchronizer index.yaml.j2 file. And it updated, ran it through the synchronizer and applied it. So if you just need, if your model's fine, but your synchronizer isn't syncing the data to your VNF that you need, you can more quickly iterate in this way. Okay. Alrighty, that concludes the tutorial.